Hiya, good evening. So tomorrow is Valentine's, although I may not get this video out until after Valentine's, but tomorrow is Valentine's and I'm going to be seeing a lot of rose related fragrance videos. A rose by any other name, I mean, it is the symbolic flower of romance and it's certainly a beautiful fragrance note, one of my fragrance notes of course. But while the rose is having her moment of glory this Valentine's Day, I wanted to give a lot of tribute, a lot of credit to another note which I think has always been there supporting our beautiful rose fragrances for the most part. I'm not sure she gets enough credit. Aside from it being Valentine's tomorrow, and I'm sorry if I'm slurring, I've had 2 glasses of wine. Probably should have done this on 1 glass of wine, but hey ho, here we go. Aside from the Valentine's Day tomorrow, what's actually prompted this video from me is that all day long I've been smelling a beautiful scent on my top, which I wore last night, and I sprayed a fragrance last night. Hello Nimbus. And this fragrance has been haunting me all day long because it's so intoxicating and beautiful. I started trying to think about how many fragrances I've got with raspberry, and with raspberry within a certain kind of profile with certain kind of notes, and it turns out I've got quite a few. So I wanted to make this evening's video a dedication of our very underrated but somewhat magical little fruit that is always tangy or sweet or juicy or tart, and definitely more elegant than a strawberry. So that is going to be the note of raspberry, and that is our start of today's video. So without being an expert or going into too much detail about raspberry in fragrance, I've never been really sure what natural raspberry, what synthetic raspberry, what the difference is and how they're used and what is actually available. I really don't know. So I did a very quick read, and it turns out that most of the time it will be a synthetic raspberry. Most common synthetics that the perfumers use in fragrance is the synthetic note of framboline or raspberry ketone. So credit to the Perfume Society, which is where I just got my information, but I also read that the raspberry plant is also related to the rose plant, which is really interesting and makes a lot of sense in the way that they are in fact paired in perfumery and how they just marry up so beautifully. And the majority of my raspberry dominant fragrances are in fact rose raspberry fragrances. I've got a lot of fragrances to get through in this video. All the gorgeous raspberry fragrances I'm going to feature all have a significant contribution or presence of raspberry. For the most part they are rose and raspberry. Raspberry is probably my favourite note in perfumery, one of my favourite notes, but it's really up there and I think it is competing with the rose. Raspberry seems to really push this real vibrant, sweet, sometimes tart, sometimes fizzy, juicy, pink quality into a fragrance. I've got quite a few to get through and I'm going to try and keep it short and sweet, sweet like a raspberry. Let's start with my Ride or Die, and as close to being a signature as I have ever had because I've worn it so much. Coming in from the house of Van Cleef and Arpels, we have the most exquisite Rose Rouge. I apologise for my hands, I seem to get rougher every video, but I do a lot of manual labour and it is what it is. Possibly the most successful blind buy that I've ever had, considering how much I enjoy it. Now, considering how much patchouli and vetiver is in the base of this, there's actually vetiver in the mid and the base, it doesn't bother me, and it should, because I really don't like that typical patchouli, dry vetiver, you know, kind of feeling from a fragrance with that kind of very sweet fruit in there as well. That rose raspberry combination is very syrupy, it's very jammy. Jammy in the sense that, like, if you've got a raspberry jam and you've got really strongly infused rose petals, that is kind of what you're getting. It's sweet, it's quite luxurious smelling, quite velvety, but it's tempered by the very woody elements of the vetiver and the patchouli. There's also cacao in here, which I never really pick up on. I don't get that cacao. And vanilla, so you've got a sweet, creamy aspect as well. Overall, I think of this as a rose patchouli scent. A fairly simple and kind of mass appealing profile, but done in just a little bit more of an elegant, sophisticated way. So it's just one I really, really enjoy. Ride or Die. Really love it. So that is my first raspberry rose perfume. So that is Rose Rouge. So this next fragrance may not be centered around a rose raspberry combination, and it's really not known for that in the slightest, but it does have those 2 notes, and I think it's the quality in there that is why I'm so drawn to it. Pretty element to it. It's one from Guerlain. It's one of their newer Oud fragrances, and it is Oud Nude. So this is actually quite a soft, very approachable, very clean oud fragrance. Very, very clean. It's very, very delicate. And there's quite a cherry-like nuance in here, but the cherry, that pinky, fruity cherry vibe is coming from the raspberry. And it's so lovely, it's so beautiful. It reminds me of sugared almonds. The raspberry and vanilla makes it quite sweet. Of course, you've got that woody oud. And you've got the rose in here as well, but it's bringing like a delicate sort of pink quality. But that very delicate raspberry rose combination, I think that is the quality that I'm really drawn to in this, and it is incredibly pretty. Overall, like I say, it is an oud fragrance. It's a very pretty, delicate, almondy oud scent, but it does have that beautiful raspberry and rose, and I absolutely love it. So that is Oud Nude. So next, going to the House of Lancome. This next one I wasn't going to include because it is discontinued. However, it's such a great example of the kind of style that I like. It does have that absolutely delicious, bold rose and raspberry. And it is Rose's Berberanza. So this is one that I enjoy this one so much, and it has such a syrupy, jammy, rose and raspberry quantity and quality. It's quite a polarizing fragrance. It's very, very boozy. It's very syrupy. It's quite sickly. And the nutty quality, pistachio and hazelnut in here. But there's this weird kind of funk that is what makes it very polarizing. And it is very strange. But there is such a syrupy, delicious Turkish delight quality, which I think is coming from mostly this rose and raspberry. And it's really amplified with honey, rum, and all the other notes going on in here. But I think, again, it's that vein of this rose-raspberry combination that is so delicious, so perfect. And it is like on steroids in here. Big syrupy raspberry rose. So staying within the Maison Lancome family here, one from the same line, we have Rose and Peonia, or Peony. Such a pretty fragrance. It opens up really pink. It's pink pepper. It's just that little twinkling of a pink spice. Real nose tingly, but that's another note that really does marry up so beautifully in a rose raspberry fragrance. So it's got that bit of pink pepper at the top. It's got such a watery, fruity rose, dewy and juicy. It's also peony in here, so with peony, rose, raspberry, pink pepper, but it really does smell pink, and it's not too heavy. It's just pretty. It's not green. It's sweet. It's definitely sweet. This is very, very similar to Holy Peony from Dior. Very, very similar, but this one has just got the edge of sweetness for me. Such a pretty quality, and I like that it doesn't go into a sort of a musk direction or a patchouli direction. So that is Rose, Peonia or Peony. I think it's time for some Dior, darling. So let's go into the House of Dior. We have 3 Maison Dior or Dior Privé fragrances. The first one here is such a pretty, you guessed it, rose and raspberry fragrance. So this one is called La Colle Noire, and she is definitely pink. Such a pretty fragrance. This is actually a green rose. I think this is definitely a garden rose, definitely pink. But there's a stem in here. She's still on the stem. She's still got a leaf. So it's definitely a green quality. But there is such a lovely sweetness from both raspberry and from lemon. And I think I love the rose quality in here because she has that raspberry holding her hand and taking her along this lovely pink path of fresh, fruity, sweet deliciousness. The lemon is noticeable on the rose. I think that's what makes it kind of light and carefree and very day wear. I think what saves this from being a little too mature or a little too green is that very fruity, sweet pink raspberry. Really pretty one from Dior, that is La Colle Noire. Next one I've got here from Dior, it's actually the first so far that doesn't have rose. Raspberry is finally getting her moment. She's not been overshadowed by any kind of rose. And she's with her fruity sisters, Rouge, Trafalgar. I'm quite obsessed with this scent right now. I keep pulling through, I keep wearing it. Raspberry, cherry, strawberry, and blackcurrant. Such a lovely collection of fruits, well, berries more than anything. The berries in here are very watery, very clean, very juicy, but also quite transparent. They're not too sweet. They're not too sweet. It's just that there is sweetness in there, but it's just a fruity, musky fragrance. We've got musk and patchouli. It has quite a sort of fuzzy, gruff feeling about it. The patchouli is quite dry in here. I find that lovely. It stops it going into a typical sweet, fruity direction that we just see so many of. This one has such a lovely balance. A red berry splash-on kind of a scent. Rouge Trafalgar from Dior. Another here from Dior. Again, doesn't have a rose, but there is rose in the title. It is Oud Rosewood. This is really addictive. I don't wear it very often because it is very strong. And it doesn't suit any occasion for me. It really doesn't, but there's just something so addictive. It's a very dry, but very elegant, woody fragrance. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be any kind of expert on different types of wood, especially rosewood. I really don't know much about it. The Oud, extremely clean. It's very, very clean. It does have a pink quality, but I believe that is coming from that raspberry. Raspberry is almost laced within the wood. Very, very subtle pink quality in here. Sandalwood in here as well. It's a very smooth, very kind of savoury, dry, woody fragrance. But really pick up on something so satisfying and Moorish in here. And I think it is that bite of raspberry. That is Oud Rosewood. If ever there's a moment for raspberry to really let her hair down and shine and hit the town and go wild, it's in this next fragrance. And it couldn't be further from the elegance of Oud Rosewood and Rouge Trafalgar and things like more sophisticated and not quite as daring. Here we have it from the house of Mugler. We have the very eye-catching, nose-catching Nova from the Angel lineup. So there is always this question mark over why is she part of the Angel lineup, because I mean, I agree there's nothing Angel about this scent. What is certainly very Mugler about it is that it is a very polarizing scent. Rose raspberry on steroids. So synthetically loud it's virtually radioactive. But you know what, I actually really enjoy this fragrance. It's the profile that I enjoy. Again, sweet pinkness, that sweet pinky raspberry rose. You've got, I think, lychee in here. Those delicious pinky, fruity, rosy qualities that just work so well. I don't think pink pepper is a listed note. I would put my money on it. This is a pink pepper bomb. Maybe that's just the synthetics that are blowing my mind. You've got benzoin in here and also something called Acagalium wood. It's a very playful party fragrance. It's vibrant, it's fun, it's got a tropical feeling to it. She's drunk, she's living her life, she's great, she's having a great time. Let's not hate on this lovely little fragrance. It's a lovely explosion of a lovely synthetic raspberry. So that is Nova. So we're going to turn the volume right down the other way again and talk about a fragrance. It's actually very delicate and very pretty. It doesn't have a main feature of raspberry, but the raspberry really is bringing a pretty fruity edge to it. So from the house of Nicolai, we have a really beautiful little violet fragrance called Violette in Love. Such a delicate little Parma violet fragrance, and it's slightly unusual. It's not your typical Parma violet. It has quite an unusual note of coriander, which brings a kind of a savoury dry down, only delicate. Got a raspberry note in here, which actually it does bring this pink quality. It stops it being typically powdery and dry and boring. Actually, I think the raspberry is bringing this slightly fruity sweetness. It rounds it out with more of like a dewy effect as opposed to being just powdery violet and then a woody, boring, you know, dryness in the base. It's really bringing a lovely quality. I think it'd be nice to see more violet fragrances that have got a touch of raspberry with them, because it does, I think it pairs really, really well. It's very easy to wear. It's very, very pretty. But I think the rose quality in here is what is kind of making it bounce a bit more, if you like. So that is a very pretty Violet in Love from the house of Nicolai. So this next fragrance is so pretty and it always puts me in a whimsical mind in the most sort of delicate way. From the house of Louis Vuitton, it's called Heures d'Absence. I hope that's how you pronounce it. Such a pretty floral fragrance. It's very delicate. It's quite a watery kind of floral. It gets compared to Daisy. You do have rose in here, you do have raspberry, so there's that beautiful combination. But it comes in a very kind of watery, ethereal kind of way. You've got jasmine, mimosa, there's definitely musk in here. I bet there's some vanilla as well. I always think I'm smelling lychee when I smell this, because there's a watery fruit. There's a juicy, delicate, almost rose flavoured, delicate fruit in here. Such a delicate texture to the scent. I always think of a white rose under the rain, lilac rain. It's almost a lotiony feel to this as well, watery and lotiony. It's just so pretty, such a pretty scent. Another beautiful one with a note of raspberry. Two more fragrances here with a note of raspberry, and I think they do showcase the note of raspberry really, really beautifully. They're from the same house, and they're kind of the reason I have been on such a raspberry kick lately as well. A house I've only just discovered. I've only tried two from this house so far, and they are the two that I own, so that's a good start so far. Quite a dangerous start as well, because I'm going to have to try more in this house. This is the house of Mizenze, Sweet Praline, and this one is called For Your Love. For Your Love gets a lot of hype here in the fragrance community, and Sweet Praline doesn't get talked about as much. But this is the one that I discovered first and I fell in love with it straight away. These both, I think, are sister fragrances. They both have a lot of similarities, and they both have a similar kind of profile. Both I would call a wispy fragrance. A sweet praline, kind of elegant little nod to both raspberry and praline. I get more of a caramel vibe than a praline vibe. Definitely smell that raspberry in the beginning, and it's very much 50-50 in the spotlight with this kind of praline. Is it praline or praline? Along with this other quality that I can never put my finger on what it is. I don't know if they call it woody or papery or grassy. There's notes of hedione and also papyrus. I get this kind of very light, this subtle floaty paper quality. It brings everything together, but there is a sweetness, and the sweetness is coming from this, I think, I'm going to say caramel. That's what it reminds me of. It doesn't remind me of praline. It reminds me of, I don't know how to say it now. That's where the sweetness is coming from. But it's like all those notes have been blown up in the air, and they're kind of wafting around, taking turns to come forward. And I like that it is wispy and easy to wear. Very pleasing. I have really connected with this scent, and I find it so easy to wear. So that is Sweet Praline. Lean line. So For Your Love is much more popular. I think I realised why. It has sort of a very recognisable Baccarat Rouge 540 vibe. I hate to sound lazy and boring saying that, but it is no question that is what I'm getting from this. It opens out quite recognisably in that way, with that kind of wispy candy floss, ethyl motto molecule, cooling breeze of mint and candy floss. It's that kind of vibe. You've got ambergris here giving it a sort of a boosted dose of a salty breeze. It actually morphs into quite a strong raspberry. Yeah, that raspberry seems to sort of grow from the mid onwards, and it gets quite strong. It's not too fruity. It's almost like, I'd say it's edging on being quite a dry raspberry, almost, I wouldn't say powdery, but there's certainly a concentrated feel to it, but it is still got this wispy air, slight medicinal vibe at one stage. I'm not sure where that's coming from. There is an unusual element to this, and I think that could come out stronger on certain people's skin, which is why I think some people really love it and some people don't. That doesn't last on me, and I because I pick up on a lot of the raspberry in here, I really enjoy it. Similar DNA, like I say, both of these have this similar feeling. Really enjoying both of them. So For Your Love and Sweet Praline. I'm sure there's a saying about trying to find the thing that's been right in front of you the whole time, but you just couldn't see it. Well, that applies to the raspberry content in this next fragrance, and it is such a fun, cool, interesting fragrance. This is one from the house of Zoologist, and it is called Cockatiel. Everything about this fragrance is yellow. I mean, that is the point of it. It's supposed to mimic the cockatiel, and it's so fun, and it's so clever, and it's so addictive as well. Rhubarb and custard sweets, that's what I get from this. There is such a yellow fluffy quality in here. You've got mimosa bringing this proper yellow dusty kind of flower quality. There is rhubarb. I love the tart quality from that rhubarb. You've got a champagne accord in here as well, so there's this lovely kind of fizzy, fun, fluffy yellow whole character happening here, and it's just so Moorish. That's Zoologist for you. You're never going to get anything dull. It's always interesting and arty and very niche and unique. There was a day where I kept smelling this beautiful note of raspberry, and I could not remember what I'd sprayed. And eventually I remembered I'd sprayed cockatiel, and I thought, but that's not raspberry, until I looked at the notes and realised actually there is raspberry in this, and it is the quality I think that's standing so forward. It's a raspberry that I think is so close up that you don't realise it's there. Like if you were to stand back, whatever the scent profile is, if you were to stand back from it, I think you'd be smelling it through a raspberry. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. But it's not obvious until you know it's there. Raspberry is so noticeable when you know it's there, and it is such a great quality to have amongst the rhubarb and the mimosa and the champagne. It's so playful and so Moorish and delicious. I absolutely love this fragrance so much. So that is a beautiful, unusual interpretation of a raspberry in a very yellow fragrance. So that is Cockatiel from Zoologist. Oh, we have two left. We are getting there. Let's talk about a fragrance that I think of as my Valentine's fragrance, which is so appropriate. And it's one I featured in my last video, actually. So definitely check that out, because we have the lovely Jon Snow in that video. But this fragrance is such a treat. It is a little delicious treat. And it's from the house of Panah London, and it is Pink Marc de Champagne Truffle. So this is a raspberry truffle. That's what this is. The notes in here are rose and raspberry. There's that lovely rose and raspberry again. Dark chocolate and brandy. Those are the listed notes anyway. We have the note of brandy in here, which does bring more of a a sort of syrupy booze quality, which makes the overall composition seem more decadent and more delicious. This is a delicious dark chocolate truffle with a raspberry and rose centre. And then you've got that boozy, heavy, syrupy quality as well. It's incredibly sweet. And you get that pink, you do get that pink quality coming through in the scent. That chocolate in there, which is kind of more of a thinner quality, which is good because you don't want it too juvenile and heavy. This is definitely a gourmand for grown-ups, this one. Very decadent, very delicious, very strong. What more could you want than a delicious chocolate with rose and raspberry in the heart of it? So definitely worth checking that one out. That is my beautiful Valentine's Day fragrance, Marc Champagne Truffle from Panah London. So I think I've saved the best till last, at least for my preference anyway. And it's the one that I have absolutely fallen head over heels for. It's up there in my top tier along with Black Rain from Renier, Confessions of a Garden Gnome. There's just something about this one that is so intoxicating to me. It just has a quality that I cannot stop sniffing. And it is my quintessential dark raspberry fragrance. It's from a house that doesn't really get talked about much. I don't hear anyone talking about this house. I think they made something quite special here and I really am enjoying it. So this is called Ruby Wood. The Ruby Wood is my dark raspberry. Once I start spraying this fragrance, I cannot stop. It is absolutely intoxicating. I stole the tassel from the box, so it does come with the bottle technically, but I don't know how I did that now. I used over a hairband or elastic band, I can't remember what that is. It has a kind of decadent, almost royal feel about it. So Ruby Wood actually has rose in the top and the mid. We have more than one rose, but it really is the beautiful red fruit of the raspberry that I think about when I think about Ruby Wood. Red berries, cassis, pink pepper. There's those amalgamation of fruits and that pink pepper again, which again is a beautiful combination with raspberry and with the rose. I love how this just gives you this dark depth straight away. You've got oud, coffee, myrrh and labdanum, very sort of dark, opulent, heavier notes, but everything in here is absolutely seamless. I don't pick out any of those darker notes separately. What I get is everything sitting behind this dark red berry, and it is definitely the raspberry that I believe is sitting at the front. When I first smelled this, I smell dark, powdery raspberry. It's definitely got a powdery quality, but it's not a powdery scent. It has this dark, woody, resinous feel sitting right behind it. It's a seamless, complex scent. The layers, the materials are all so tightly bound that you've got this one contained scent. This one for me, like I say, is all about that raspberry, and it comes off dark and slightly powdery, and slightly tart, and sweet. An opulent winter raspberry fragrance for me. I absolutely love it. So that is my last one today. That is Ruby Wood from Exaltatum. So guys, thanks so much for sticking around. I think this is quite a long one, but I really wanted to have a moment for raspberry. So these are all my fragrances I think best showcase the note of raspberry, often pairing up with the note of rose. And a lot of these are my absolute favorites. So that says an awful lot about that note. And that is where I'm going to leave you. I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Let me know what your favorite raspberry fragrance is and what I need to get my nose on next. So thanks guys, have a great Valentine's, and I shall see you on my next one. Over and out.